So, the question that we are addressing today is whether the child custody system is biased against Black fathers. That's the question today. And I have an expert sitting with me who can help me answer that question. So, let's get into it.
That Corbin and Corbett legal team fighting for the rights of the people. That father-daughter team investing in the youth when the system ain't treating them equal. Providing truth for our people, we able to reach them. So anytime you get accused for a crime and Lord knows you ain't do it, we here to get you through it. Exemplifying prudence and glorifying God, making sure you're compensated for other people's doings. Our vision is to be one of the best. We're small enough to focus on your matter throughout the neighborhoods of Dallas. Working constantly and making sure your rights are protected. A firm team of lawyers, aggressive, effective. A team that has your back in the courtroom. Two well-spoken Black lawyers in the courtroom. Investing time and resources when it's evident that you were treated wrong. Now you walking out of Dallas courtroom with a settlement. Corbin and Corbett, the father-daughter legal tag team that has your back in the courtroom. Our purpose is simple: to obtain the favorable outcome for each client and glorify Christ in all we do. Our vision is to be one of the best and most...
All right. So we are back. Thank you for sticking with us. I am Attorney Augustus Corbett, aka the Minister of Justice, and I'm one half of the Defiant Lawyers. The other half is actually fighting for justice for one of our clients at the moment, so she will not be with us. I'm speaking of the Duchess of Justice, Chloe Corbett, but we have a very, very, very well-abled substitute today. I will tell you who you see already, but I will let her introduce herself in just a moment. But anyway, we the Defiant Lawyers, we provide legal analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture. Each Saturday between 2 and 3, we got to a late start today. In fact, we had some technical difficulties, but we are here because we are committed to being here every single Saturday with with something I don't believe you can get from any other YouTube channel. The information you need to defy this unjust legal system. Go ahead, subscribe if you're not one of the subscribers. Also, like, share, and comment. Yes, we are off to the races. Today, is the child custody system biased against Black fathers? This is a hot topic. We hear it all the time. We fight these cases in court. And like I said, we have a subject matter expert who can help us tread through these waters today. None other than my sweetheart, my wife, Toni Corbett, the mother of one of the Defiant Lawyers and the wife of the other one. So she is in the house. How are you, sweetheart?
I'm amazing. Yes, I am in the house today.
All right. Very good. So what you think about the topic?
Oh, I think it's a real relevant topic. I really do. We hear it all the time, and I'm glad we'll be able to shed some light on it. Yeah.
Excellent. You've had a lot of contact with this topic. If you would share some of your background.
Okay, I'm now retired. I just retired the end of last year, and currently I am the Chief Operating Officer for Corbett and Corbett. But prior to coming on board with Corbett and Corbett, I was a social worker in the child welfare. So for the last probably 25 years, I've worked with families in distress, children of abusive or neglectful environments. I've worked with the parents, both mothers and fathers, in the child welfare system. So yeah, I have had a lot of dealings and contact with fathers, Black mothers, white fathers, Asians, immigrants, across the span of ethnicities, working with families, just trying to make sure they can stay intact when possible.
Sure. Today, though, we're focused on Black fathers, as our topic is whether or not the child custody system is biased against Black fathers. And I'll go ahead and say, based on the research, the answer to that question is yes. And that's what the studies show. We're going to talk about one or two of the studies in just a moment. But I do want to say that we are a law firm that represent families, parents, both mothers and fathers. And as you said, Tony, not just white, black, Asian, Latino. We represent fathers, mothers of all ethnicities over the years, and so we don't have a particular bias ourselves. If we take on a case, then we work diligently and zealously to achieve the goals of our client, whether the client is a black father, white father. We have white father clients now. We have black father clients now. We have white female clients now. We have Latino female clients now. So we represent the gamut. All that said, though, the question is whether or not, based on the data, whether there is bias against African American fathers in the child custody system. And according to the research, there is that bias against black fathers. So before we go further, what do you got to say about that? Now, I got some stuff we're going to put on the screen here, but what we're going to do is just kind of talk this through, because you and I both have a lot of experience in this space, right?
Right.
So we're gonna talk it out. We're gonna talk it out.
Right. And I agree with your answer. My answer would be a resounding yes. There is bias in the family court system towards black fathers, definitely. And I say that because the research supports it, and I believe it stems because there's bias in the general public of black men. I would go as far to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. So let's put some information on the screen to show that our opinion is an informed opinion. So
Okay.
So, black fathers in the child custody system, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, notice this doesn't say according to Augustus and Tony Corbett, this is the CDC. It says 72% of black fathers live with their children compared to 85% of white fathers. Now, when I read that, that really, 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 really surprised me, because that's not what you hear in the media, right?
It sure is not. No. We hear something totally different from that narrative. And that's what I'm saying. I believe as we continue in the conversation, there will be a lot of things that we can we'll say that will debunk the myths that are out there, the narratives that circulate, in the nation.
So I think, well, let's go back. Let's read some more. A study by the Pew Research Center found that black fathers are more likely than other dads to be single parents. And then it goes on to say the same study found that black fathers are more likely than other dads to be involved in their children's lives, regardless of whether they live with their children or not. Studies have shown that black fathers who live with their children are just as likely well, we'll come back to that. But those three stats right there, 72% of black fathers live with their children. That really, really surprising. A study by Pew Research Center found that black fathers are more likely than other dads to be single parents. And the same study found that black fathers are more likely than other dads to be involved in their children's lives, whether they live with their children or not.
Mm-hmm.
We just got to talk about those stats because they show the serious misconception and misinformation out there about Black dads.
Right. No, I agree. In fact, I think on point number 2, the research I found said agreed with that. 29% of single father households are made up of Black fathers, whereas with Hispanics, it's 20% white fathers make up single father household, and then I believe.
Wait a minute, you said with Hispanic, you saying Hispanic white fathers?
No, I'm sorry. I think let me just see where I put it. It's 29%. I have it right here. 29% of single father household. 29% are Black fathers. Okay. And then I believe it is.
Well, we'll give you time to find that.
It's 20% Hispanics.
Okay.
Would make up single father households, and then 14% whites.
Okay.
All so right. Black fathers are the most likely to be the heads of single father household. That's my point.
Okay. Could you now just give it to us, straight? Okay. What, 29%? Yeah.
Black fathers are the most likely to be heads of single father households, as compared to 20% of Hispanics and 14% of whites. So of all the single father household out there, 29% would be Black fathers, 20% would be Hispanics, and 14% would be whites.
Okay. All right. And that comports with what the Pew Research Center found, that Black fathers are more likely than other dads to be single parents.
Right. That's what, it agrees with that.
Right, because 29% of single fathers are Black, 20% are Hispanic, 14% are white. So, right. So that's consistent with what the Pew Research Center found. So, okay, before we move on, and the CDC, 72% of Black fathers live with their children. And that same Pew Research Center report found that Black fathers are more likely than other dads to be in their children's lives, whether they live with the kids or not. If all of that is true, why do Black fathers catch such a hard time? Why are we considered to be such awful fathers?
Well, like I said, I believe it's because of the general image and stereotypes that are out there in the general public. When you see news clips on evening news or cable news, Black fathers are portrayed, gang banging, drug dealers, incarcerated. We know how mass incarceration is disproportionately affecting Black men. So all of that imagery, to me, just makes people think, well, Black fathers are not involved in their children's lives. They're absent fathers. We hear that all the time. If you hear the word absent father, then you're going to pretty much associate that with a Black father rather than a father of another ethnicity. So all of that, to me, the implicit biasness, that goes on in the court system, with the judges, with lawyers, with police officers, with even child welfare workers, social workers, or anyone else, because generally there's a lot of bias against black men, that they are not as up on their game as other men in our nation.
So then the reality is quite a bit different than the perceptions in society about Black fatherhood.
Right. And some of the research, when you say Black fathers tend to be more involved in their children's lives, things like taking their children to school or babysitting or helping them with homework. That's the type of involvement from all the research that I've seen. They say Black fathers tend to be that intimately involved in their children's lives, more so than white fathers, Latino fathers, Asian fathers, whatever other ethnicity there may be.
Well, you
Black
said
fathers,
you said when they say, who is they? Who are you referring to when you say they say?
when the I'm saying the narrative that's out there.
Okay.
The narrative that's out there is that Black fathers are not involved, but the research says that no, Black fathers tend to be more involved. So, what I was trying to say is that the research that says Black fathers are more involved, I was just giving you some examples of how that involvement, what it looks like. It looks like Black fathers tend to take their children to school, more so than other fathers. They tend to be involved with helping with homework or with babysitting.
Yeah. Earlier, what you said was they say that Black fathers are more involved in their children's lives. And I want to be specific because the narrative, as you just said, is very different than the reality. So, what are we citing? Who are we citing? What source are we citing to debunk that false narrative?
Well, I
So,
believe that you put up the Pew Research
yeah,
said that fathers are more involved.
yes, and the CDC. So,
Right.
so let's see how this works. All right. So, let's go back to the CDC stat. It says, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 72% of Black fathers live with their children, compared to 85% of white fathers. Now, we
Hmm.
have all heard of the statistic that 72% of Black children are born out of wedlock.
Right.
Explain to me, I have a theory, but explain to me how both of those can be true. How can 72% of Black children be born to a single parent, mother, yet 72% of Black fathers, this stat says, live with their children? How can that be true?
Well, to me, that's two different things because 72% of Black fathers living with their children, that would include, in a marriage situation. Am I understanding that right? Plus, if children, Black children, are disproportionately born to single mothers, that doesn't mean that the Black father is not living in a home with that single mother.
It just means
That's the
that
way
it means that a lot of the kids are born out of wedlock.
exactly. Not that the father's not living in a home. It's just that they were not married as husband and wife.
Well,
That's,
go ahead.
I mean, that's the way I would theorize it.
Well, it if both it's not a theory. I mean, if both of these are true, this is the CDC. I think the CDC is reliable. All right. So the CDC has said, printed, reported, has published the fact that 72% of Black fathers live with their children. But then I believe I could search the CDC annals and find that other statistic that says 70-something percent of Black children are born to single parent mothers. So juxtaposing those two stats is what I'm saying. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the only way that makes sense is that black fathers, 72% of black fathers live with their children, but they are not married to the mother in most cases.
Right. Right. Yes, that's the only way it can be. Because black father, you're a black father, whether you are married to the mother or not, you're still a black father. And so what the CDC is saying, 72% of black fathers live with their children.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to point out is that is not the narrative that's out there.
It is not.
That's
I
not the
agree.
narrative. The narrative is black men are sorry, no good dads. They're not involved in
Yes.
their children's lives, and they are deadbeat dads. That's the narrative.
Right. That's the narrative.
And
That
that's
is the narrative.
because that statistic that 72% of black children are born out of wedlock, that's where that narrative comes from.
Right. Because then people take a jump and say, well, if the children are born out of wedlock, then the father, is absent, not involved, not in the home, all of that. And this stat debunks that.
Well, I don't want to make light of that because I mean, I'm harping on that. I'm focusing on that because it has tremendous implications for black men in terms of policies that come out of Washington, policies that come out of state legislatures, how black men are treated in the child welfare system, how black men are treated in the criminal justice system, how black men are treated in so many ways. If people are thinking these black men are just sorry, no good men who don't do anything for their children, when that's false, that has very, very, very serious implications for black men.
I agree. So it seems like to me the focus has been on, okay, if it's 72% black fathers live with their children, then that's what, 28% who don't live with their children. So it seems as if we magnify and we overemphasize and we, just run with that 28%. And that's how you get that narrative that's false, that false narrative. It's just like to me when we're looking at the news clips, you would think every black man is a gangbanger or a drug dealer because that's all you see on the television, or that's all you see in the movies, or maybe that's what you hear with some of these particular rap artists. Whereas the majority of black men are hardworking men, fathers, going about trying to have a successful life, you know? So we just overemphasize the negatives.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Of course. That's what we're pointing out. Yeah. I mean, it makes very good sense to me. I mean, we agree on it. We're trying to communicate this to the public.
Right. And of course, with you and me and probably most people, we would want that number to not just be 72%, but 92%, whatever. But currently in our nation, the way that the narrative is, you would think, it would be like 20% of fathers live in the household with their children.
20% of black fathers.
Of black fathers, right? Of black fathers. That's what you would think, but that's not the case.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna do more to, because I must admit, I too have not. I have perpetuated that narrative as well, because I'm very, very familiar and have quoted many times that 72% of black children being born out of wedlock, and I have made the assumption that therefore means that 72% of black children, their father is not involved in their lives. You see,
Right. Mm-hmm.
I think we, not only society, but probably black people have made that narrative too, without doing more circumspection than we should have. And so I mean, because my mind is blown basically reading this Pew Research Center statistic and the CDC statistic. I'm going to go back to it. 72% of black fathers live with their children. 72% of their black father. Now, like you said, sweetheart, we wish that was 92%. We wish that was 100%.
Right. Right.
But 72%, based on what we have been told about how many black children are born in single parent families, you wouldn't think it, like you said, you wouldn't even think it's 72%. You would think it's 22%.
Right. Yeah. I agree. I agree. It is it's something. That's why I heard somebody say the other day, numbers don't lie, you know?
That's right.
It's all about the data, you know? So I'm glad that you have this up. I'm glad that you're bringing this out today.
Well, yeah, because we need to, again, push back strongly on the notion that black men are bad, deadbeat dads.
Right.
Now, all of us can name and think of black dads who are not involved in their children's lives and who got, many baby mamas and all of that, right? We can think of that.
And see, when you say that, that's what we focus on. And I mean, and it is an issue. I mean, I'm not here saying that it's not an issue. It is an issue. I saw it in my line of work,
But
in
but
child
here,
welfare.
yeah,
But
but here's what I'm saying. Let me just get this out.
okay,
All right, so we can think of those examples, but I always point out that we should not base our opinion on anecdotes,
right,
right? We should
right,
never base our opinions on anecdotes. You learn that in science. You learn that in social science. You learn that in the life sciences. You learn that in the physical sciences. Don't base your opinions, your professional and or personal opinions, on the examples that you know personally, because
I,
that is a very small sample of the larger population. Instead, do the homework, put in the legwork, do the research, and find out what the statistic is on a nationwide basis.
right.
And when we do
I,
that, we see that black men have gotten a very bad rap where fatherhood is concerned.
very bad. And I'm telling you, with the news, with the movies, with the commercials, or whatever it may be, it has just permeated our society, that false narrative. And so my whole point is that's what they focus on, is the 28% who are not living with their children, black fathers who are not living with their children. They're focusing on, we talk about mass incarceration and how many black men are in prison. And a lot of times the research would say a lot of them did not have their fathers involved in their lives coming up as a child. We focus on that and we just gloss over the statistic you just put up there, that there's still 72% of black fathers who live with their children. We gloss over the fact that of all ethnicities, black fathers tend to be more involved on a day-to-day basis with their children than other fathers. I mean, you just don't hear that.
So there is a need to re-educate the public here.
Yes.
right? Because again,
Sure
the implications are very serious for Black men because they create biases not only in society, as you pointed out early in this conversation, not only in society, but in the child custody system, the child welfare system as a whole, in the
Right.
criminal justice system, and the in the in the business area, you know,
Yeah, education. I
education.
mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It has really permeated. I mean, though it becomes talking points. Where if more Black fathers were involved in their children's lives, we wouldn't have A, B, C, D. You know, and nobody has even pointed out that 72% of Black fathers are living with their children. Now, one thing I will say, as being, a social worker and having been in this space, and you probably could attest to this, it could be that we are focusing on giving Black fathers a bad rep because the percentage probably was higher, you know, back in the 50s, 40s.
Well, but do you have support for that?
I think I read that today. I think I read it. I don't have it in front of me.
Well,
Um, because
let's I'm not discounting it, but the legal rebels are the types who will who will want some data, you know.
right. I
We
mean, I was reading a lot, but the point is still valid though, that
Okay.
most people, if you ask them, they would not say 72% of Black fathers live with their children.
That's right.
That's the whole point now in 2022. Okay. You
Okay.
would think, that it would be so much lower than that. So that's the point that we're making today.
Okay. All right. So now let's go to your expertise and experience in the child welfare system, which involve child custody, right?
Right. I mean, it involved, you would be more with you and Chloe fighting for custody. Um, my involvement with child custody from child welfare was when we were unfortunately having to remove children from the custody of their mother or father due to abuse or neglect.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. So, I mean, we've fought we've fought child protective services many times in court who were trying to get custody of children from parents that we were representing. So, I mean, you have a vast amount of experience as a CPS. And by the way, CPS, I mean, you rose through the ranks. You started out as an investigator, then you became a supervisor of investigators, and then you became a consultant to the
Management.
to management.
Yeah.
Right.
So I became a senior level consultant, so to speak, to the managers who were managing all of those different investigative units.
Exactly. All right. All right. So yeah, don't play down the fact that you all did a whole lot of custody stuff, like you said, in the unfortunate, situations where you all had to remove children. And I know that's the better term. You don't like to say take children.
Yes,
Remove.
please do not say take. And let me just say that you don't want me to get back into my.
I do. I'm trying to.
Wasn't okay. Sometimes it was not unfortunate. Most of the time, when we removed, it was for the safety of the children. Okay.
All right.
The unfortunate part comes in is that we all know if children can stay with their parents, that's the best thing for them. But that's why I was just trying to make the point. our involvement was very narrow when we would had to say, okay, we know in most instances if these children can stay with their parents, that's going to be the best for them. But because of the abuse or neglect that's going on, and the parents are not willing to make the necessary changes, then for the safety of the children, we have to remove them from the parents' home and put them in the foster care system.
All right. So you said don't get you back in that framework. No, I'm trying to provoke that. That I do. I want you to get back to that because we're talking about bias in the child custody system, and
Okay. Okay.
and some of that biasness may be, I mean, it emanates from Child Protective Services. So let me just ask you a direct question. All right. So
Okay.
let me give you a hypothetical. Let's suppose whether you were a consultant, let's say when you were a consultant, or let's say you were a supervisor,
Okay.
and you had a mom that you had a child that was in, at risk or even a victim of child abuse or neglect in the mother's care. Now, in a situation like that, would you all sort of dismiss whether the father would be a suitable person? And I'm talking about an African American family.
Mm-hmm.
Would you all sort of dismiss whether the father would be a suitable person to put that child with because it's a black father and you all are operating from the assumption that most people operate from, and that is 72% of black fathers are not involved in their children, the false assumption that 72% of black fathers are not involved in their children's lives. And so therefore ain't even no real, so therefore trying to place this kid with the father is not even a real option. So let's look at some other, family members or sometimes foster care even.
Well, okay. I have to answer that this way.
Okay.
Because I had spent many years in the child welfare system. It used to be back in the mid 90s, we would not do our due diligence to try to even find out where the fathers were. We would ask the question, well, who's the father? Get the father's name. And if he wasn't living in a home, maybe we wouldn't do a whole bunch of research trying to locate that father. That's how it was like when I first got into child welfare.
Okay.
But things progress,
Now,
thankfully.
but hold on a moment. Now, I want to quiz you on that. You said
Okay.
you all would not do your due diligence. I mean, explain that. What was that because of a bias that you all had toward
That was because right. That was because we were not as a profession, we were not doing what we should have been doing to locate that father, to
now?
make sure that the father knew that CPS was involved in his child's life.
Now, how broad was that? That's sort of that's a broad brush when you say we. Are you talking about we in your department, in your unit, in
I
your
think
area, across
I,
the country?
I think across the nation, especially when it would come to Black families, I think across the nation, child welfare professionals were not doing their due diligence to locate the fathers because of biases, assumptions. We just wouldn't probe. Okay, that could be another word I use. You know, if the mother said that, and I know this is anecdotal, but this is just an example. If the mother said, yes, the name is Ed Jones, and then we would say, where do you know where Ed Jones is? And she would say, no, I haven't heard from him in, 3 years. Now
That
this
would
is
be
back
the end of it.
this is back in the 90s now, mid 90s, okay? And I'm going
Okay.
to show you that things have changed for the better. And so we would say, okay, yes, we asked the mom, we got the name, but she doesn't know where he is. And that would kind of be the end of it for all practical purposes, okay?
Okay.
So then we would just go with if the child has to be removed from the mother, then we would pretty much Well, I wouldn't say remove, because now when you get into the court system, if we actually physically removed that child from the mother's home and we got into some litigation, then the judges would be telling us, hey, you all got to find that father. But that would be further along in another, and I hate to get into weeds, but another department, say conservatorship, you all got to, show forth effort that you're trying to find Mr. Ed Jones. But from an investigator standpoint, our thing would be, we got to get this child safe. We got to get this child safe into a safe place now. So if we don't know where Ed Jones is, we're going to place the child maybe with the grandmother or with the aunt or something like that. And we'll let another department go and try to locate Mr. Ed Jones later. But see, that would have been after all of that initial contact with CPS, with Child Protective Services.
All right, well, let me jump in here. All right, so now that you said a mouthful. First of all, a lot of your former colleagues would probably take issue with that characterization, that you all were not doing your due diligence to find Black fathers across the nation. I'm sure some would take issue with that. But second, why weren't you doing your due diligence to find the father? Was it because of those biases?
I think in some cases, yes. And I think in some cases, resources, because now that's why, if you let me get up to what we were doing right before I retired, I can show you the progress that has been made.
Okay.
But back in the mid-90s, we didn't have what we call special investigators who would go and try to locate the absent fathers, now you have public data and all these other places on the internet where you can try to find people. We didn't have access to all of that, back in the day. That would be one thing.
Okay.
And when you say that some of my colleagues would take issue, well, of course, not every single child welfare, unit or every state did this, but I'm telling you, research is out there. Like the Ann Casey Foundation is a real nationally known organization to help with child welfare and try to improve the outcomes for children of abuse and neglect. Changes became a part of the profession because we were not doing a good job. You know how in any organization, when you find out, oh, we're not doing a good job here, then you implement new policies and practices and all. So if anybody's being honest, we were not doing a good job locating these fathers. The fathers would complain. The public would complain to the state officials. They would lobby on behalf of fathers, especially Black fathers. So now it's a much better situation. It's not perfect, but it's much better than when I first started in the mid 1990s. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Wow.
So now let me just say, because I don't want to leave it there, because there was lobbying going on, and because fathers would say, "Hey, why am I finding out?"
But let me jump in before you go. We're gonna get to where you're trying to get, because you want to show that there's been a lot of improvement,
right?
But you spark so many questions in what you're saying, and I think you're helping us understand why there is bias in the child custody system against black fathers. Now, before we go on, someone commented on YouTube, and I want to address it, because this is another one of those, tropes that's out there about the Black family as it relates to Child Protective Services.
Okay.
All right. So this Joseph Boyer says, let me get where I can see it. Yes, and you have to thank the Democrat Party for breaking up the family system because they told black women, here's welfare for you and your kid just have to be single. And y'all keep voting for them. Now, just omit the obvious racist stuff in that comment, okay? But I do want to address this issue of whether Child Protective Services broke up the black family because of some of the biases that you are saying existed and still exist, but even more so in the 90s, 80s, and so forth. And we all know what this person is referring to. There's this in conservative talking points. There's this notion that when first of all, there's this notion that black women are welfare queens. But again, just dismiss that foolishness. But the black women who were on welfare, is it true that they couldn't get their check if the fathers lived inside the home?
Okay, now I worked in child welfare. I didn't work in the welfare system where
Okay.
you would get the AFDC checks, the monthly checks. So I'm no expertise in that. Let me say that right out front, okay?
Okay.
I only worked in the section of protecting children from abuse or neglect.
Okay.
Now, with the welfare system, the limited knowledge that I do have, of course, if a mother signed up to receive a welfare check, and let's just put out there for everybody, most the people who are mostly on welfare are white women, okay? Even
right.
though you never hear that. Welfare is always just associated with black women welfare queens.
A
But
term that was created by Richard Nixon and then used a lot by Ronald Reagan and a whole lot of other white GOP conservatives.
right.
Go ahead.
And another thing with the person whoever wrote that,
Let me say too.
Democrat, so making assumptions that everybody black is a Democrat. I know disproportionately blacks may support Democrats, but I'm not a Democrat. I want that out there. I'm not a Republican either.
That goes for both of us. Let me just throw this out there too, Tony, which is I've had black conservatives to tell me that black people vote Democrat to get welfare.
And I think that is just so ridiculous. I really do. I think that is just showing ignorance. Okay. So going back to what your comment was,
yes,
the commenter, just think about it.
The question is whether or not CPS policies in the 70s were that black women, and it's so crazy. It's a crazy. All right. Whether black women couldn't get their welfare checks if the black father was living in the home with her. Now, look, even if that's true, the question then becomes, wasn't that also true for white women who were on
That's what I'm going to
welfare?
say. It's the same thing. Whoever, if most of the women on welfare are white women, that goes for their the white fathers. I mean, if it's a law within the welfare system, and again, I did not work in the welfare system. I worked in Child Protective Services. I had nothing to do with who got checks and how much those checks were and trying to find out who all lived in the household. That was not the area I worked in, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But since there was a welfare unit that supported mothers who needed support to try to help take care of their children, once they signed up for that welfare check, okay, that they would get at the first of the month, then automatically, if the father was not living in the home, then it would start a search. That unit would start a search for that father so that he could perhaps pay child support. Okay.
That's right.
And from what I understand, yes, the father was not in the home. That's why the mom needed help. But again, it wasn't like the only people getting help were Black women. Most of the women getting help were white women, which meant white fathers were not in the home either. Or if you were Asian, or if you were Latino. I mean, if that was the policy, that was the policy across the board. Again, they took that and ran with it and made it seem as if only Black women were getting welfare checks.
And only Black, and if the policy, if that's true, that was the policy, that if a man was in the house, they couldn't get checks. The presupposition is that that policy was directed only toward Black women and Black men or Black families. That is preposterous. The question is just dripping with a lot of racism and ignorance and so
Right.
forth. And that's why I said just try to omit that part and address this long held belief that the Democrats, and I guess they do that because FDR, created the welfare system, and the assumption is I guess they're saying he created it for Black people, which we know is false, completely
And most of the
false.
people benefiting from the welfare are white people because there are more white people in the country. And there are more white people receiving welfare benefits.
And corporate welfare, by the way.
And don't even mention corporate welfare. Don't even get me on that.
Yeah.
So, but again, Child Protective Services is not the same thing as welfare. So your commenter, he got that all wrong, saying CPS policies. No, CPS policies deal with trying to make sure that children live in a safe environment.
Yeah.
That was the scope of what we were doing. That's totally different from the AFDC unit and the welfare. How you go and apply for welfare and get a check. All of that. That's different.
And also, I'll say this before we leave that question and that topic. Since we want to parse this out politically, I think it's pretty safe to say that when Strom Thurmond of South Carolina switched parties from the Democrat Party, Strom Thurmond was a strong segregationist, white supremacist, racist. When he switched parties and became a Republican, a lot of the Dixiecrats followed him into the Republican Party, into the GOP, and it was those Dixiecrats and their ancestors who are really more responsible for doing damage to the Black family because they were the plantation owners and
Right.
who separated families at their whim, Black families, and sold them and so on. So I mean, we are an informed and educated group of folks here. Mr. Boyer, you got to come with something better than GOP racist talking points. And again, we're not Democrats, by the way, or Republicans. But anyway, we can move on. That is not the reason the Black family has, suffered any harm at all. What we're talking about specifically is the false narrative that Black men are not good fathers, that they are deadbeat dads, and how that impacts the child custody system and so many other systems, right, against
Right.
Black men.
Right.
All right. Okay, so let's go back to some other data that we have. Studies have shown that black fathers who live with their children are just as likely as white fathers to be awarded custody in a divorce case. However, due to certain biases, black fathers who don't live with their children are more likely than other dads to lose custody of their children. All right, now, how interesting that is. Let me paraphrase that. Black fathers who live with their moms and who live with their children's mother who are married, when they get a divorce, they're as likely as other dads to get custody of their children. But if they don't live with the mother of their children, they're more likely than other dads to lose custody of their children. Did I explain that okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that's because
And I think there's go
that's
on.
because, well, it just says that's because of some biases, and I think we've been talking about those biases. But go ahead.
Yeah, I believe there are some built-in biases. Also, I believe that sometimes just the mere cost, of and this is changing too, but it can be very expensive. If a black father is hiring a family law lawyer to fight on his behalf, um, I believe that also black fathers can internalize this false narrative that's out there to say, well, what's the use of me even putting up a fight? Because they're going to automatically assume the worst, that I cannot be a good dad or I should not have custody of my children. So I think there's a plethora of reasons why that's the case. But at the end of the day, I do believe biases are built in, and that black fathers, and you'd be surprised sometimes that black mothers who will, because they maybe had a big falling out with the dad, the black father, I mean, they'll work against their children having any type of relationship with the father. And I've seen that, when I worked in child welfare, where they would just counter the mother, the black mother would be a gatekeeper and say, no, they don't need to, go over there to their father's house, or sometimes when the investigators would go and interview the mother and ask about the father, she would say, well, no, he's not involved. And then that same investigator would go to the school, talk to the child and say, when is the last time you saw your father? And the child would say, I stayed with my father last weekend. So sometimes even the mothers would be fighting against black fathers. I've seen that. I don't know if you see it, in your practice, as you have represented, mothers as well as fathers in divorce cases. But there are so much that goes against, I believe, the black fathers having custody of their children.
Yeah, and to be sure, there are some rotten black fathers. And no one is sitting here and saying that all black fathers are great black fathers and they're just getting, just being mischaracterized and so forth. No, there are some rotten black fathers, but there are some rotten white fathers and some rotten Hispanic fathers and some rotten Asian fathers and some rotten black mothers, white mothers, Hispanic
Yes.
mothers, Asian mothers, etc. There is not a black male gene that makes black men bad fathers. That's the point that we're making. You got bad of everything, right? You got
Right.
bad what? You got bad in all races. We
Right.
are dispelling the myth that black men are disproportionately bad fathers. In fact, the data shows that black men are disproportionately involved fathers.
Right. Right. In fact, because of this narrative that was out there, I don't know if you have seen this private group, but this guy named Matt, I believe his name is Pressberry. Back in 2008, I believe it was 2008, he started a Black Fathers Facebook group. And do you not know that now that group has about 93,000 members? Because he said he was tired of that narrative that, all Black fathers are just bad, deadbeat fathers, they're absent. And now it has grown to almost, it's approaching 100,000 Black men involved in this private support group that's dedicated to trying to help Black fathers.
Yes, that's right, and
I
I
think
was
that I just think that speaks volumes, because Black fathers saw the need for this and they are participating because of all the biases and the stereotypes, that's out there.
well, I was hoping that today we would see our Facebook um, commenters and subscribers and followers and the YouTube comments and followers all in one place with this new software so that I could look at it and see it all. But for whatever reason, that is not happening. So I went to Facebook and I want to acknowledge Sister Ave Aldridge. And she says, for the most part, um, those practices are not really looking diligently for fathers. So I think she's affirming what you said. And she said, oftentimes Black mothers use kids as pawns because they have been wounded by the father, not
Yes.
not taking into account that the kids are hurt by this. I see that all the time. I see that though with Black fathers and mothers, white fathers and mothers. It is such a heartbreaking situation actually to see the kids caught in the middle.
Right. I totally agree with what Sister Abe said. That is so true. And because of all of this, what I had wanted to say is there has been a shift and there is a push. I know before I retired from Child Protective Services, now we have to do due diligence, in trying to locate our fathers. So things have changed. In fact, there's here we live here in Texas. The state of Texas now has a whole nother unit called the Father Initiative Program, where if a father, regardless if the father's Black or whatever ethnicity, they have someone who provides some mentorship, um, someone who tries to help them navigate through the CPS system if their child has been removed from the parents. So there has been some progress made in trying to locate and trying to keep these fathers involved in their children's lives. So I'm glad to report that. That's what I was trying to get to earlier.
I was
These
going to get you back.
okay.
I was going to make sure you had the opportunity to tell us how things have been improved in
Yes.
the
Now
child.
from the beginning, it's not, beforehand we would kind of wait until if the child was removed from the home, then on the back end we would be trying to locate the fathers. But now on the front end, from that very investigative process, we now can well, I say we, I'm no longer in it, but the profession now can take advantage of special investigators to try to locate absent fathers and a lot of different resources. So things have began to change for the better.
Well, one last question, and we coming to a close, and that is, do you think that the bias that we discussed, especially what took place up until these recent changes, do you think that contributed to the disproportionate percentage of Black kids in foster care? I mean, if CPS was not diligently looking for the other parent, then the option was the foster care system. and there is definitely a disproportionate percentage of Black kids in the foster care system. Do you believe that biasness toward Black fathers contributed to that disproportionate number of Black kids in foster care?
Well, research is out there that the biases that Black people have to face in general has contributed to the disproportionate amount of Black children in foster care. One aspect of that would be because we were not diligently searching for the paternal side of that child's family. Because even if the father may be, not involved, or, God forbid, incarcerated, the father still has a mother or a father. So there could be a grandparent on that paternal side of the child's family. There could be a paternal aunt, rather than placing that child in foster care with
Okay.
strangers. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But what research shows, that's why even in the state of Texas, they have a unit called the disproportionality. Biases on every front, I guess is, and I'm telling you, from the time people called in to the state of Texas to report abuse and neglect, there are biases with teachers, with police officers, with nurses, with neighbors. It's because, we live in America, for me, just to put it bluntly. Whereas they would call in a report on a Black family much quicker than they would another family of another ethnicity. That's why there's been so much of trying to re-education of this implicit bias that goes on even within the child welfare system.
Okay.
So it's throughout and throughout. That's what I'm trying to say, and not trying to locate the fathers is one piece of it.
Okay. As far as the disproportionate amount of Black kids in foster care.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So, are there any parting comments, sweetheart? We've come to the end of our hour. In fact, we went over a little bit. I want to say before you make your final comments that I appreciate you joining and sitting in with me today while Chloe is, in fact, fighting for a Black father.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
but again, I don't want to leave the impression that our firm, our practice is focused primarily on Black fathers. It's not. We represent people from all races and both genders in these child custody cases. So, but it's just the fact there is some bias when we do deal with when we are representing Black fathers, we do oftentimes confront the biasness in the systems toward the Black fathers. And so that's why we wanted to talk about this today. So, are there any parting comments from you, sweetheart?
Well, I would just say that both parents are equally important in a child's life. That we can keep a Black father involved in his child's life, we need to do so. Be it the family court judge, be it the lawyers fighting on behalf of that father, be it the mother of that child, whoever is involved in that child's life, unless that father is a danger to the child, I would really strongly recommend that the fathers be involved, and that we try to support that father's involvement in his child's life on every hand, because a child needs both parents. That would be my parting word.
Well said. Well said. Thank you for saying that and bringing us back to that point. And I also want to thank you for the 25 years of public service that you gave our nation in protecting children. I saw up front and close the work that you all did. It wasn't perfect, and sure, you know, in any field, industry, you got the biases and so forth. It wasn't perfect, but it came from the heart. And there were a lot of children who were protected from serious abuse and neglect. You all literally saved lives. And there's always much room for improvement with a big bureaucracy like that.
Right.
But I seen up front and close how you and those you worked with worked hard on behalf of children. I've traveled outside of the United States. I've seen countries where there is no child welfare system, and the children are just left to the whims of the adults and were just awful victims of all types of child abuse. Thank
Yeah.
God for the child welfare system. It can be better. It has
Yeah.
biases, but we thank God for it. Thank God for the work that you did with your colleagues. And again, thank you for sitting in with us.
Thank
And
you for the invitation.
yes, and you all, thank you for tuning in today. We apologize for the technical issues early on. Again, I'm using some new software. It worked okay, seems like to me, once we got this little bug fixed. We'll be back next Saturday, God willing, with some more exciting talk about the law as it relates to African Americans. And listen, if you have a child custody issue or any sort of family law type issue or personal injury issue or criminal defense issue or civil rights issue, we are the firm for you. We're located here in the Dallas area. Just go on our website, CorbettFirm.com. You'll find us, and we'll be happy to talk with you and see if we can help. We are committed to improving lives. That's what we do every single day. All right?
Yes.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Tony, again for sitting in with me. And that is going to be all for today. You all take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.